this is a process and I was investing into that. But for him to see that, that's not the wiring he had in his head. I'd been working on this for a while and he hadn't. So I had to give him that grace, so to speak, but that time, and realize in his shoes, it looked like you're going to raise a child who's out of control. And he wanted his child to be successful.
Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I'm your host, Joanne Crone, joined here by the lovely Bree Tucker.
Why, hello, everybody. How are you?
We're just coming back from the long weekend and we're all energetic. So energetic, we decided to schedule 3 podcast interviews in one day.
Well, yeah, it kind of felt like that. It normally doesn't, because that wipes me out. And it's funny because like between the two of us, I think we've kind of like, I'm a bit more of the extrovert consistently, but
People energize you, usually.
yes, yeah, but this much podcast recording, it's honestly, it pushes my ability to pay attention.
Oh, yeah. No.
Because it's
no,
the
you
long
need, like, the
periods of
repeat
time that I have to be 100% zeroed in and focused on what we're talking about. And I can't be like, oh, look at that pretty thing right there. Oh, look at, oh,
I
yeah,
know,
I
you
gotta
gotta
do
let the
that.
mind wander. Gotta let the mind wander. Well, yeah, we're both like that. Usually I will have no focus or anything after.
Yeah, we're both
But-
spent afterwards. We're
Yeah.
like, okay, done. Brain is mush falling out of the ears at this point.
But this interview you're going to hear right now, this is our first of the day. Our brain is not mush. Our brain wasn't mush during any of them, but
No.
we're very fresh. And this is a great conversation because if you have trouble with conflict, like if you are at all uncomfortable about conflict, this is a must listen to episode. Also a must listen if you have trouble talking with your husband or your parenting partner about getting on board with the same parenting kind of discipline scenario. Also, really, really powerful. We are talking with Sara and Kyle Wester. They are the founders of the Art of Raising Humans podcast and their private practice. They coach families all over the world through trainings and one-on-one coaching to help support and equip them to raise children that are self-connected, respectful, and kind. Sara and Kyle are also the proud parents to 3 kids, 14, 11, and 8. And we are so excited for you to hear our conversation with them. Let's get on with the show.
You want mom life to be easier. That's our goal too. Our mission is to raise more self-sufficient and independent kids, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to help you delegate and step back. Each episode will tackle strategies for positive discipline, making our kids more responsible and making our lives better in the process. Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast.
How long have you guys actually been working together? Like you've been married and now you have a podcast together. Like, how did that go about?
Oh. Well, we started out, we went through our master's together. So we did that together. But I started out in the nonprofit world with child abuse. And I was a child therapist working with kids who had been abused and, things like that. And he started out in the school system.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was an elementary school counselor. So she was there, really learning a lot of great skills, helping these kids in really hard situations. And as we did that together, of course, our own kids came along. But the way all this other stuff got birthed was as I was helping these families with the private practice, as I left the school, there's so many times I ran into issues I didn't know how to help parents with. So I would come home and ask Sara, and then Sara would give me this magnificent advice. And I would come back to those families. They'd be like, that was amazing. Oh my gosh, that really helped. And I'd be like, Sara, we need to expose you to the world, honey. Like I'm getting all the credit, but it's really you. So that's when I was like, hey, listen, it's no big deal. Let's just go in our closet. We'll just get a mic and we'll just record some conversations about things. And she was so nervous to do that because
he's the extrovert public speaker type. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, well, I get that.
Well, so it was so fun, Joanne, to see within like 10 of our first 10 episodes of the podcast, I just kept reading her every text we got from friends that said, Kyle, I like it, what you have to say, but I really am just waiting to hear Sara talk. So every time I'm listening to a podcast, I'm going, okay. I like that thing Kyle said, but what's Sara going to say about it? So I kept reading that to Sara, like, Sara, they want more Sarah. They want more you. So that was the plan, was as we were doing more speaking stuff in Tulsa, where people were asking us to come to schools and churches and speak. I wanted us to be able to do this better on stage, because whenever we had done it before the podcast, it was super awkward and
It was
clunky.
hard.
And it was like I would talk, and I would look to her and just be like,
She'd smile back at you.
Like, that's my cue, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
yes. So I was like, honey,
Yeah.
we've got to get this flow better, because this flow stinks right now.
Work in progress.
It's a hard kind of rhythm to get into. And I love how you describe the extrovert and the introvert, because I mean, like, Sarah, as you probably know by now, introverts like watch the world and have such amazing, insightful things to say. And when you say, Kyle, that people are like, where's Sarah? I mean, like, I'm sure it's that. Like, it's this insightfulness that extroverts bring the people, and introverts are like, narrow in right in there. So it's a great partnership. I'm glad you
Well,
guys
and
found the
there's
rhythm in
even
your
times,
partnership.
Joanne, where I've been coaching, even recently in the past few weeks, I'm coaching a couple, helping them, and I'll come back and I'll think I gave them some great thoughts of ways to switch what was happening at home, but then I'll go home and run it by Sarah, and then she'll give me a couple thoughts, and I'll be like, oh shoot, now I have to do a video. So I'm like, I have to do a video for that couple, and I'll send it. In the next session, they'll be like, thank you for that video. It was so helpful. I'm like, I know. I should have just spoken to Sarah before I gave you all those thoughts.
No, I mean,
know.
like everybody adds their own
Yeah.
things to a relationship and a partnership. And that's what we're talking about today, all about using those conflicts you have in parenting to make a stronger marriage. Because as we were talking before we started, like those conflicts in parenting can really tear partners apart. I mean, like I have two kids, one's 15 now, one's 10. But when we had the baby and trying to figure out who takes care of the baby, like, you don't have those discussions usually before you get married when it comes to childcare, and that can create a lot of drama and a lot of conflict. Did that create a lot of drama and conflict for you both when you first had kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the funny thing is you think, us especially, so we had been through grad school, we had been through conflict resolution, we've been through all these classes, and you think you've talked about everything. And then you have these
Yeah.
little babies, and you think, wait, there's a million things we haven't talked about yet. And things come to light that you
Exactly.
just never. Our first really big argument, I mean, this one actually was pre-kids, was about Santa Claus. And so, I mean, who would have thought that we needed to have a 3-hour conversation about Santa Claus? And then after we got married, I was in a whole different space than Kyle was with having kids, because I am so grateful. I got into this job working with families and children, and they were really hard situations. And I got some excellent training. And I don't know how people parent without it. But so I was just in a very different space than he was. You talk about the space you were
Yeah,
in.
and so when we had the kids, I was kind of in this weird space of almost like, listen, you have been trained really well 0 to 3. So how about you just take them 0 to 3, and then I'm working with pre-K on up to 5th grade, and then we'll just need to get some better training before they become teenagers. So I had this like really stupid kind of compartmentalized way of doing it, but it actually was what I was doing. I mean, I look back with our oldest two. We've got 3 kids. We've got a 14-year-old daughter, an 11-year-old boy who turns 12 this weekend, and then an 8-year-old daughter. And so with the older two, I really had this kind of silly way of seeing it, of like, I don't know what Sarah's doing. I don't know how she does that with the babies. I'll occasionally help when asked to, but for the most part, whoever's good at that age, you take over that age. And then I will jump in at like 4. And really, it was because of just my own shame, my own incompetence. Like, I'd never held a baby besides maybe my niece. Maybe my niece was the only baby I ever held before we had our own babies. Whereas Sarah grew up holding babies, working in the church nursery, or all these kind of things. So it looks so natural for her. And I always remember one moment, guys, that Sarah left me home with our oldest, and she was like 9 months, and you'd gone back to work. And she
Maybe
said,
9 months. She was young.
she
She's on a bottle. I mean, she needed a bottle.
and she said, this is real simple.
Yeah.
You just feed her the bottle. It's no big deal. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of scared, but it sounds simple enough. And it got so bad. I mean, I'm being like, it got so bad. I took her to the babysitter who had occasionally watched her, because Abby would not take the bottle because I was so anxious about it. I was so nervous.
Nervous. Yeah.
And all the thoughts in my head were like, what? I suck as a dad. Like, this is horrible.
Mm.
What kind of dad
Aw.
can't feed their own baby? And then to watch when I gave Abby to the babysitter and the baby just fed like that, I was like, what is wrong with me? And I realized my lack of skills. And that's kind of why I was backing out in those early years, was because I didn't feel like
Yeah.
I could succeed. I thought, you're good at this. You just do it. So if you need me to wipe a diaper, I can do that. But these other things are just too hard for me.
Well, it's so interesting because what you're describing is a confidence issue too. And like you've described something that a lot of moms talk about when they first start breastfeeding. Like they don't know how to do it. They're right here, they're stressed out, no milk is coming out. And many women are telling themselves, oh my gosh, like I can't even feed my own child because it's this lack of not, I wouldn't even call it skills. I would just call it like lack of
Yeah.
knowledge or
Yeah.
lack of self compassion that we give ourselves when we're parents that like we don't give ourselves that it's okay. We can learn along the way. It's more of a like either I suck at
Yep.
it or I'm
Yep.
amazing at it. There's no in between. Uh
Right?
so
Yeah.
like did you I guess feel like how did that go then in the parenting process? How did you get over that, Kyle? And Sarah, like
How
I'm
did that make
also
you
interested
feel?
how you felt.
Yeah.
Yeah, what Bree said. How did you feel during this when he's just like giving up everything and saying
Because
like no?
Right? Because, like, I imagine a lot of the conversation that you're talking about, Kyle. First of all, let me just say, wow, I feel related now because my background is in early childhood. So that was the exact same division up my ex-husband now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't have the best
There's
communication.
more reasons for that.
Well, my ex-husband and I had set up was that, like, he's like, "Okay, you do birth to 5
Yep.
because that's your
Yep.
thing, so you do that."
Yep.
But he also never really had a "I'm gonna come in" kind of plan. I don't think there was ever a tap out plan.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I always felt so isolated and alone. Like, I knew that he thought I had it, but at the same time and I'm wondering, Sarah, if you were like this at all, like, it was so much pressure because it was like, "Oh my god, he thinks I know
Yeah.
everything." And I thought I knew stuff, but it's different when it's your own
Mhm.
kid.
Yeah, no,
So
definitely. Actually, even talking about nursing, that was a real stressful thing because I had been through, you go through the training and all that stuff. And I had actually worked with a lot of moms. But when you're there and your baby's crying, your baby's hungry, and things aren't working as planned, and that's all very scary. I did feel pretty alone in it, even though I had all this training. I was like, oh, we've got to work on attachment, and I had all these ideas and all these things I knew I really wanted to do, and I wanted him to be more involved in that, but he was in a space just where he wasn't gonna do that. And that's not where he
yeah.
would I
Mm.
mean, I could hand him the baby and he would hold the baby, but it wasn't this active engagement and here, this is what we're doing with our child. This is the kind of connection and relationship, and this is what we're going somewhere together. It was, "Okay, you've got
Mhm.
this."
You lead.
Yeah.
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 And so, yes, there was pressure, and I just kind of also felt this little bit of sadness because I knew he could have been more involved and enjoyed that connection with our little ones when they're little, but that's just the space we were in at the time. And then as they got older, then you hit behavior challenges and no's and tantrums and all that stuff. And that's probably when our conflict really began to rise.
Oh, and I want to get into that conflict right after this break.
Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Hey guys, Bree here. I have two sisters. We're all within 5 years of each other, with me being the youngest at 44. Typically, when we get together, we sit there and chat about stuff like our hot flashes, or our raging mood swings, or our inability to sleep, which is making us pretty cranky. Yep, you have guessed it. We are all going through perimenopause and menopause together. And while I love doing things as a family, this is not one of them. I have to say though, lately I haven't had as much to vent about because I'm currently getting treated for my perimenopause symptoms. And I've got to say, it's been going fabulous. If you're experiencing things like night sweats or having trouble sleeping, sudden weight loss or libido changes, moodiness, anxiety, depression, or brain fog, all of these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around perimenopause and menopause that can start as early as 40. Stop pushing through it alone. There is help and it's easier to get than you might think. MIDI Health offers virtual, no rush visits with your clinician, Plus, you get email, messaging, and phone support for anything you have going on. The best thing is MIDI accepts most insurance coverage and has affordable cash payment options too. So schedule yourself a virtual visit to discuss your symptoms and health background in depth. You'll come out of the experience feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. With specialized insurance covered care, MIDI puts relief within reach for so many women more than ever before. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. Support for today's episode comes from Honeylove. Honeylove has really revolutionized the bra game. Say goodbye to that uncomfortable underwire without sacrificing the lift that we so desperately need. For a limited time, you can get Honeylove on sale. Get 20% off your entire order with our exclusive link, honeylove.com/NGM. Support our show and check them out at honeylove.com/NGM. Now, let me tell you guys, I have found that as I've been getting older, that comfort and cuteness are not as easy to find when it comes to a bra. And I can honestly say that I have found that with my new crossover bra from Honeylove. It is so comfy and it gives me the lift that I desperately need as 44 years old with lovely triple D ladies. I honestly have had the hardest time trying to find a bra that doesn't feel like I'm wearing my grandma's bra. And this is it. Honeylove's best-selling crossover bra is extremely comfortable. It is going to be your new go-to bra. It's definitely mine. It gives me all the support of a traditional bra with an underwire without that uncomfortable underwire. Plus, the mesh gives it some little sexy touches. Like, I actually feel very cute when I'm wearing it. But it doesn't stop there. Honeylove also has really great shapewear, tanks, and leggings for everyday support. I recently found the perks of wearing shapewear. I know it took me a while to get there, but I've tried it and it was amazing. Over the past week, I had to go to a wedding and I tried the Superpowers short under a sundress, and oh my goodness. For once, I wasn't pulling at my skirt and I felt totally slimmed down with my tummy and my thighs. I have not felt this confident in a sundress in a very long time. What can I say? Honeylove has you covered for those everyday looks, workouts, weddings, everything. And it's definitely something that you need in your life and you have earned it. Honeylove is not just about supporting women, it's about empowering women. So treat yourself to the best bras on the market and save 20% off at honeylove.com/NGM. Use our exclusive link in the show notes to get 20% off. That's at honeylove.com/NGM, and you're going to find your perfect fit. After you purchase, they ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them you got sent by No Guilt Mom. Honeys, you deserve this. Be free of the pain and discomfort and keep the support with Honeylove.
Lynn, this time of year, parenting can be such a flusterclux.
You've come to the right place. I'm Lynn Lyons, and I've been treating anxious families for over 30 years.
I'm Lynn's sister-in-law and co-host Robin Hudson.
Join us for Flusterclux, a podcast for parents who worry.
Wait, that's everybody.
Yeah, these last few years have felt like one long anxiety attack for so many.
Why do you think parents are always surprised that a podcast about anxiety relates to them, even if no one in their house has an anxiety disorder?
Well, worry is human. Everyone does it, and anxiety shows up when we face uncertainty.
All the parenting tips you've taught me have been essential.
I love to break it down into skills we need to manage worry in our families.
We've covered so many topics: depression, burnout, meltdowns, perfectionism.
Don't forget scary mothers-in-law.
Right, but of course that's not my mother-in-law.
Because that's my mother.
And a listener.
As a psychotherapist, I like to teach parents and kids how to respond to everyday moments in healthy ways.
Managing anxiety really can be taught.
It really can. And I'll even tell you what to say.
We talk about serious stuff, but without being too serious.
Anxiety wants everything serious. Anxiety doesn't stand a chance when we're laughing, even about the tough stuff.
We were talking a lot about how you took over a lot of the 0 to 3, Sarah. And Kyle, you were a little scared. You were a little hesitant to get involved there just because of your own confidence. But then, Sarah, you started to say how the conflict really happened when your kids started to get older. So tell us about that.
So, once, as we all know, when kids start to have opinions and sharing them with us, that can really bring things to light. And our oldest one, not only that, but she's got a very strong personality. And I love that about her. But she's not afraid to let you know what she thinks and feels. And 2, 3, 4 years old, that was big, as it is with all of that age group. And my way of handling it was very different than Kyle's.
How is it different?
Well, definitely when I saw the
Mm-hmm.
bigness that Abby brought to the table, it definitely seemed like a challenge to me. It seemed like I need to overwhelm her and let her know I am bigger and stronger and she will not boss us around, right? So
Oh,
at like 3 years old,
yeah.
since this was a girl being raised by two therapists, at 3 years old, we'd be up at like 3 a.m. and me yelling and telling her she needs to go back to sleep. Like Abby just loved to wake up at 3 and just stay up the rest of the night. If she woke up at 3, she'd be like, "I'm ready to go." And so I'd be
Let's go, people.
exactly.
Party
She's
up.
always ready.
Yes. So I would say, Abby, you need to go to bed now. And what Abby would say to me, she'd point at me and say, "You need to apologize to me in the morning for talking to me like this." And then
I love
I would
her. I
say,
love her.
I will say whatever you want me to say as long as you will go to sleep. And like it boggled my mind watching Sarah be so patient, so kind, so nurturing, and all,
At 3 in the morning.
and she was, and eventually that led to Bree, where hey, if they wake up in the middle of the night, you've got them. I'll get up at like 4 or 5 a.m. and take them the rest of the time, right? So then we end up doing this
Yeah.
kind of rhythm to that. But at that time, we were both waking up, and just how patient she was with the kids, and I started to judge that as weakness. I started to judge that as her being passive and her being permissive. And in my world, in the home I grew up in, you just didn't let kids run the house. Like dad needed to be the boss and the kids needed to know that.
And
And
it was sort of that immediate, one, you weren't allowed to have big outbursts of feelings and you needed to obey, those kinds of, I've
Yeah.
said to do this, go
Those
do
kind of
it.
things in his
Yeah.
house.
yeah,
My way or the highway, kind
exactly.
of 80s.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And Bree, what was frustrating me, and Sarah and I would have conversations about this, is I would come home from work, and this is where it really started like blowing up in our house. I'd come home from work and I'd hear Abby being really upset and yelling at Sarah. And Sarah would be there being all still sweet and kind and trying to help Abby. And I would immediately come in and nothing but judgment and criticism would enter my head. And I'd be thinking, why is Sarah allowing this while I'm gone? And when I come home, now I've got to be a jerk. Now I've got to come in and be the heavy, and I've got to be the one who insists that Abby, not talk that way or whatever it is, right? And so at this moment, I didn't know in Sarah's head, but I know she was thinking at this time that I don't know how many more kids I want to have with him because like he's really angry a lot. And I was mad a whole bunch.
I want to put a pin in
Yeah.
something right there, Kyle. So first of all, like I am so thankful that you are so vulnerable about this and your inner thought processes because I know a lot of women in our community talk about this dynamic between them and their partners right now. They say how like they want to take things the positive discipline route. They want to make sure they get to know their kids' feelings and needs and problem solves. Well, their husbands do come in and do the my way or the highway type behavior, and they're not quite sure how to get on the same page. So I just wanted to thank you first so much for like talking about that inner dialogue because it's
Yeah.
really, really helpful for other people to hear. And I want to know like Sarah, because so many women are in this position and you guys obviously were able to change your dynamic. So what happened that then led to the change that got you both on that same page?
Yeah. So, like you said, I was thinking about attachment. I was thinking about emotion coaching. I was thinking about firm but kind boundaries and realizing she's going to need to process feelings and kind of sticking with her in those moments versus isolating or punishing her or things like that. And I know that Kyle just had a really hard time seeing that. I'd been studying it and reading it for a long time, and we had lots of conversations, lots of conflict and lots of conversations around this because he was having a hard in those moments it looked like to him a failure and he was having a hard time seeing it. I saw it as a success. She's sharing these really big feelings with me. I am with her in that, and then we circle back around and she's learning to regulate. And yes, it takes time, but this is a process and I was investing into that. But for him to see that, that's not the wiring he had in his head. I'd been working on this for a while and he hadn't. So I had to give him that grace, so to speak, but that time and realize in his shoes, it looked like you're going to raise a child who's out of control. And he wanted his child to be successful. And he's afraid that if we keep going down my path, we're going to have this child that's going to fail in life and in the world. And I could appreciate that perspective. You know, it was a familiar perspective for me, but we had to have a lot of conversations. And the thing that he did, he eventually was willing to listen to some others because my voice wasn't enough. I was saying it, but
Right.
he's worried, he's scared. He needed some other voices to be saying that same thing. And we found some other voices that spoke his language and that he could hear. He could hear that this isn't going to be a disaster. This is going somewhere. So, you know,
Yeah.
Yes. So what helped, it was just this moment. Like I said, I didn't know this was going on in Sarah's head. I didn't know that she was maybe second guessing this commitment she made to me. Right. And so I ended up, because I was a school counselor, I was getting a lot of voices at school to help change the discipline at the school. So they wanted more of a unified discipline approach. So I actually talked to PTA. I didn't know this was going to benefit me and my family, but I talked to PTA into flying me to Florida and learning from a lady named Dr. Becky Bailey, who Dr. Becky Bailey does an approach called conscious discipline. So I was going to learn her approach. And the main thing about her approach, it came from Dr. Dan Siegel and his research on the brain and the brain development, the brain states. And I'm at the conference and I see up on the screen what it looks like when the developing brain is scared, and how the brain is just not open to learning or growing or changing. And it's all about just survival, right? It's all in fight, flight, or freeze. And when the brain feels safe and loved, how then any human, but specifically a kid in this case, is more open. They want to change, that they actually want to learn. And I just teared up. I just was moved by emotion to see I was trying to push my kid into that fear-based state. That I was trying to take my fear and impose it on them to make them scared, which was actually going to make it almost impossible for them to learn and change, which is exactly the opposite of what I wanted. So I called Sarah from the conference and just told her, like, things are going to change. From now on, I'm going to believe what you've been saying. And what Sarah had been saying for a long time up until then was she kept trying to, like, I took it as a shaming message, but she kept telling me, Kyle, lots of times the kids and I are doing fine. And then you come home and that's when they start freaking out because you're home. And like what I would see is just I would come home and they'd be more wild when I was home. And I'd be like, has this been like this all day long? And she's like, well, parts of the day were, but most of the day was not. And it's like your presence is powerful. And I took that as like, oh, she's saying it's my fault that I've messed this up. When really what I heard from her after that and through the conference was she was trying to call something better out of me. She was trying to say, like, you can come and in the presence and the power you bring, it can change everything in a good way too. And like if you come home in a different state, kind of mindsets where you're ready to come and embrace the kids and connect with them, like the kids are hungry for it. You know, they want to do it. So once I bought into that and I saw her as on the same team with me rather than us on opposing teams, that's when the conflict switched everything. That's when if I could share,
that's
if I could share one more thing, that's where this one night where I came home and we're trying this new way, Sarah's back there, Abby's screaming in her face, and I come back there and I'm like, you will not talk to your mom this way. Like, and I did that whole classic thing, right? And then
Oh man.
yeah, we come out into the living room and we're sitting on the couch. And this is something we got used to doing where every night we would reconnect and talk about the conflicts throughout that day and ways in which we could grow together from it. But I was just mad. So I said to her, like, why do you do that? Why do you act so passive when you're with Abby? Because it forces me to become aggressive. And then Sarah said, that's funny because I feel like I have to almost be passive because I know you're going to come in so aggressive. And I feel like
Right.
one of us has to be there for our kid instead of both of us being against them. So then I said, well, I don't know how you did that. Like, I don't know how you turned the tables on me there, but then what is your solution? And she said, why don't we just believe in each other? If you think I need help, come in there and ask me. If I say no, please go sit on the couch and just think some positive thoughts about me because I need to learn how to do this with Abby.
Yeah, what I hear is that like you were going in and looking at a problem and seeing as if you needed to fix
Yeah.
it when Sarah totally had the situation under control the whole time. And so I'm interested to see what this dynamic has changed into now. And we're going to dig into that right after this.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
Hey there, I'm Debbie Reber, the founder of Tilt Parenting and the author of the book Differently Wired. The mission of Tilt is to change the way neurodivergence, whether that's having a learning disability, having ADHD, being gifted, autistic, or some combination of all of the above, is perceived and experienced so differently wired kids and the parents like us raising them can truly thrive. On the Tilt Parenting podcast, I get to talk with authors, therapists, educators, and parenting experts who are committed to this mission. I ask the questions my listeners are most curious about when it comes to supporting our kids. And in turn, my guests share strategies for challenges, out-of-the-box ideas for navigating school, best practices for therapies, tips for advocating, and so many thoughtful insights on what it really takes to help our kids grow up feeling seen and respected so they can create awesome lives for themselves. I know that raising a differently wired kid can feel overwhelming and isolating, but I promise you, you are not alone, and it can feel so much better. If you're on this parenting journey, come listen to Tilt Parenting. Together, we can shift this paradigm and show up for our exceptional kids with hope, possibility, and joy.
If you like this show, there's a decent chance you'll also enjoy the Shameless Mom Academy. Hi, I'm Sarah Dean, the founder and host of the Shameless Mom Academy. The Shameless Mom Academy is a podcast for moms that centers moms more than it centers your kids. I'm not going to teach you how to make baby food or how to make your 3-year-old or 13-year-old stop having tantrums. Instead, I'm going to bring you back to yourself. For the last 20 years, I've been helping moms through growth and transformation. Inside the Shameless Mom Academy, I help you identify who you are and who you are becoming. Look, motherhood is hard. It brought me to my knees many times and sometimes still does. Returning to who I am and who I am becoming allows me to decide how to show up in all those sticky motherhood moments, but also in all my other relationships and in all the ways I show up in my various communities. So come check out the Shameless Mom Academy wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm willing to bet you'll leave feeling a little inspired and maybe even completely fired up. And you'll probably laugh a few times because I promise we never take ourselves too seriously over here. With 700 episodes to choose from, you're likely going to find something that sparks and speaks to you inside the Shameless Mom Academy.
So we're talking about this dynamic and how you guys were at odds and how you decided to raise your kids at first. And then Kyle, you went to this amazing seminar by Dr. Becky Bailey, who it's the first I've heard of her, but I'm very familiar with Dr. Dan Siegel, about seeing the brain in this fear state. And then you had the conversation about trusting each other. Where did it go from there? I want to hear from Sarah.
Okay, so I was thinking about what you were saying. Sorry, my introvert. I'm all in the space of lit. It's
I
all
was going
good.
to say,
It's all good. Now
it's all true. I was like, I gotta get the introvert in here, man.
I'm an introvert too, Sarah. I'm an introvert who has learned to be an extrovert. And so like after these podcast sessions, I probably will have to go detox and just be in my room and quiet
for hours or something. Build that energy back up. Yeah, so we were having these conflicts, and I really was in a space of being kind of really worried about our children and worried about where this was going to go. And then he calls me and says, he's like, things are going to change. And I don't even think I can put into words how excited I was, but also we'll see,
Yeah. I know, right? That reserved
cautious.
excitement.
Yeah, I really hope this is true. But it seemed like he had found someone who he just connected with. He needed another voice, like I said, and he had found that. And so when he came back, we had all this material, and it helped me because he had someone he trusted outside of myself and that I could kind of point back to and say, well, when he would come in with the
Yeah.
styles that he's wired to do. This is what he knows. You step into parenting this way without even thought. It's just you're on autopilot. And in those moments, then when we would come together later, because like he mentioned, we got really good at coming back together later and saying, so when this happened today, this is what I was thinking, or this is what I was feeling. How did that go? And I had another voice to point back to and say, well, this is the people we're listening to. This is the approach we're leaning into. And you were kind of off there. That wasn't really where we want to go with our children. And he could do the same for me. And we got much better at probably one of the greatest things I think we did is getting good at with each other of saying, hey, do you need me right now? We could see things maybe
Yeah.
going not the way we want them to go. And we had finally agreed to go a certain direction. So then we got better at saying, can I step in here? Can I help? And not just stepping in, but asking to step in. And then we got good at saying, yeah, you take over right now and let me step out.
Yeah.
So making that switch was really
Well, we got into, like I said, being on the same team. There's even times, guys, where obviously this change didn't happen quickly for me. You're talking 2 or 3 years it took for me to get much better at it. So there were still moments where I would be yelling at the kids and upset at them. And I'd walk back into the living room and Sarah would be in there doing something like folding laundry or something. And Sarah would look at me and say, you realize what you're doing is not what we teach parents to do. And then I would say, oh, I know that. And I know. And when I come back, I would
Do
love
as I say, not as I
That's
do.
right. I would love to hear all the thoughts you have about how to do it better. And so I think that's where we started buying into this belief that these conflicts with our kids are actually gifts. These conflicts with our kids are there to shape and form us into the humans that we have always wanted to become, to help us have the marriage we've always wanted to create. And so I started seeing it, and Sarah and I intentionally bought into this, that in these moments, there's a couple steps. Is one, let's start thinking good thoughts about each other. So whether or not we're doing it perfectly, as we're there in those moments, think well of me, but really believe that I'm doing the best I can in that moment. So that was really helpful because then I knew Sarah wasn't judging me, or Sarah wasn't going to spend the rest of the night criticizing me or telling me how I did it wrong. So I believed that in Sarah's eyes, I was going to see her compassion and her grace and her understanding. And then the second thing was we saw conflict as an opportunity. Either it was an opportunity for isolation, meaning we were going to pull further away from each other like we had been, or it was going to create more intimacy. And I really believe that's what the kids want as well. Our kids want us as couples to be able to see that conflict as a way to grow closer, not pull further away from each other. And as we made that the goal, not saying it just magically happened, but we made those conversations at night the goal. The goal of us learning in this moment wasn't how I can point at you and tell you how you did it wrong and how I did it right. It was how can we become better people, but also become closer as a couple because of that temper tantrum that our kid just had, or whatever the instance was that we faced. And that to me really switched the script. That now I'm being honest with you. Now, whenever Sarah was back there and Abby or Ellie, our youngest, was yelling at her, I would just sit on the couch and just smile and just listen to how Sarah was doing it. Cause I'd be like, man, she's so good. She's so good. Like that poor kid didn't even know, like, mom's so good at this. And so it was fun to grow in fondness and admiration for her. As I heard her likewise with me, there was times where our conversations were, wow, the way you did that with Abby, I don't think I could have done it that way. And so it wasn't like, I think the thing I had bought into was I had to do it like Sarah. I didn't need to do it like Sarah. Like
yeah.
we understood the vision of where we wanted to go, and how I was going to get there may look different than how she would do it. But eventually it's going to lead to the same place.
It's funny you say that because I feel like there's a lot of times I have two people that I channel a lot when I'm trying to do my calm parenting because I have big emotions. We'll say that. I ask myself one of two questions. One is, what would Joanne do? What would Joanne say? Joanne helps me a lot. Like between the two of us, she's much more calm in the moment than I am. We both know that.
Yeah.
I was an elementary school teacher.
Hey, Joanne, I worked with a lot of elementary school teachers, and not all of them were like that. So,
That's true.
Right?
It's
So
true.
I'll be like, okay, so what would Joanne say in this moment? Or my husband is also very good. So like you with Sarah, I would be doing the same. I'd be like, okay, what would Miguel say right now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I can get myself to the point where I can logically take the step back for a moment before I react.
Yeah.
And word vomit out whatever my past experiences have told me.
Yep.
Then I can do so much better. So it's interesting to hear you. Like I would always be like, what would they say?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try that.
Yes.
And
Well, it's interesting in that what you said, like, and Sarah, you mentioned this too about Kyle. Like, Kyle, you were just reacting how your brain told you to react, how you were raised to react, how it was wired to react, reacting in these ways that kept you safe in the past, as does Bree. Like, Bree, you react in ways that kept you safe
Yeah.
in the past. And so that's how going forward. So it's really understandable. Something else you said about conflict, though, is conflict. I used to view it as a way like a good relationships don't have conflict. Like that's how I used to be.
right, because we were all
And
said that. I think when we were
Yeah.
like, that's
Yeah.
the picture perfect.
Yes.
Donna Reed and they never had fights.
they never had conflict. But what you find is like you're almost walking on eggshells around the person and you don't feel safe because you feel like you have to hide all of these emotions and feelings within you and you can't be 100% open. And then when you actually have conflict and you go like head to head, and I've had conflict with my husband now, I've had conflict with my sister in law, with my sister. Bree and I get into fights a lot, but like you get into it and then you realize how the other person treats you through the conflict, you now feel safe.
Yeah.
Like, even though you had an ego blow, afterwards, it's like you've come to an agreement, all is good. And going forward, you know much more about the person. So, like, conflict even like has had the great influence on me of making me feel safer in relationships
Yeah.
and making me feel safer, like how we go along it. Kyle, even just now, like when I called you out a little bit ago, I even feel safer in the relationship I had with you because when you came back and reacted, you laughed it off instead of coming back and being passive
Yes.
aggressive, which I think a lot of people
Yeah.
would. And so having that conflict really helps you get better in a
Well,
relationship.
wait.
Well, and
Yeah.
doesn't that also help your kids?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Like,
Yeah.
right?
Well, wait, and so that's just a model. I don't want our kids to ever be afraid of conflict. I want them always to
Right.
understand what conflict is there for. And if you think about, Joanne, you brought out several different relationships. Every relationship requires conflict to become more intimate. That's just how it happens. If we ever want to get close to anybody in our lives, there are going to be conflicts. Why? Because we're different people. Like Sarah doesn't see the world the same way I do, and that is good. She shouldn't need to see it the same way. So the conflict is actually the very strength. The differences we have is the very strength of the relationship. And so too often though, like you said, Bree, because we were taught to avoid it or be scared of it, we're always teaching our kids to avoid it and be scared of it. And we're teaching, we're modeling it as a couple, right? So I really, when we started doing this, the one word I want to add for your listeners is, the word I started using a lot was I want to co-create with my wife. I want to co-create with my kids. So whenever you see conflict as an opportunity for intimacy, you can come together and co-create a new story to what happened that day. And so instead of it being a moment where I really sucked and failed as a dad, Sarah would come and share a different story about how she saw me grow as a dad that day. That, yeah, maybe I messed up a little bit here or there, but she's like, but man, typically you'd get much more upset and you didn't get as upset as before. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Now I look back and go, maybe it wasn't that bad of a day.
And I think it took us a while too, because where he's not afraid to jump right into conflict, I was very, very conflict avoidant. I don't, conflict is, I'm trying to be more friends with conflict, but we're generally not good friends. But it took that, like you said, we're stepping into a little bit of conflict for us to get good at conflict. Because at first we weren't good at it. But having children gives you lots of opportunities. And we had to practice having those conversations and having that conflict and coming together on that so I could lean more into it and be less afraid because we want to model that for our children. It's okay to have conflict and here's how
Yeah.
to do it. And this is what happens as a result. You can go through conflict and become closer. And we needed to do that because we have now this shared vision of where we want to go. But him parenting as a dad with his personality looks very different than how I look doing the same, even though we have this shared goal and shared tactics. or techniques or skills, we're going to still look a little different. And when those things maybe brush up against each other, we're able to talk about that. And not that it's always easy. It doesn't always,
No,
it's bumpy.
never
It's
easy.
definitely bumpy.
Yeah.
But we have to be committed to looking at that conflict and moving through it.
And the kids have seen us do this. The kids have
Absolutely.
seen us in front of them work through this stuff, and it helps them be able to do it as siblings. But also,
Yeah.
like so many families we help here in Tulsa who are maybe even going through divorce and things like that. The sad thing you'll see is something that was about to happen to us, which is, they seem to have a great relationship prior to having kids. And then all of a sudden they had kids. And then because of the kids and the time it took to raise those kids and stuff, it really hurt the connection. And so they weren't spending as much time together. So therefore they started like seeing each other in a more negative way rather than positive way. And then you slowly see the relationship start to fall apart. And then they'll tell me to tell the kids it wasn't their fault. But it looks like it kind of is. It looks like that all the conflicts the kid brought about were the things they were fighting about the most. And so even though I
Yeah.
know it's not the kid's fault, to the kid, it feels like it is because that's most of the arguments were based on. And so that's where I really wanted to be intentional of saying, like, I don't want that to be the case. I want us to be able to come together and grow closer because of it. Then our kids will understand that, oh, conflict isn't something we need to be scared of. It's something that can always help us go deeper with each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it has been a joy talking with you both about conflict in relationships. I love this conversation. It was amazing. And thank you so much for coming on. And we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we had a really good story that didn't make it into the podcast because we hadn't started recording yet. But so Sarah and Kyle were talking about a time that they were at a busy place in Kansas City. Shout out to Kansas City. And Kyle, like,
And that's how that story came about.
Right.
Kansas City.
yeah, it came out because I was like, oh, I grew up in Kansas City, and they're from the Midwest.
Yeah.
So they were in Kansas City, and like Kyle was in a busy place with the kids. His wife was off with one of their kids in the bathroom, and he tripped, and he had to decide in a split second whether or not he was going to full on land on his preschooler or if he was going to land on his 6-week-old baby that he was holding on to. And he went for the preschooler. He made the choice he had to make. But the point of this that I found interesting was later on, after this happened, they're trying to decide whether or not they go to the ER or not to have the kids checked out because while there were no bones sticking out, nobody bleeding, the question was like, is there anything internal that could have happened? Should we have them checked out? And they're talking about how they're sitting there in the parking lot of Children's Mercy, like trying to figure out, like, okay, if we go in, you realize how much this is going to cost us. We are out of our network right now. And the fact that we're going to be in the ER for God knows how long with 2 kids that are crying, another kid who's not even hurt. We haven't eaten dinner, like none of that stuff. And one parent is like, yes, we absolutely have to have it checked out. And the other one is like, are you really? It seems like this isn't worthwhile. And to me, that feels like a parenting conflict, just like that is, I've been in there. I've been in that spot where you're just like, what do we do? And you're so at opposite ends of it. Like if everybody could see me right now, I'm like pounding my fist together.
Pounding
like
the fists.
You're just
Pounding the
so at opposite sides of it. Like, how do you get through that? And I feel like they really like that experience right there and the way that they were able to laugh and talk about it with us shows that this like coming back and discussing it can help. But in that moment, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and seen how that worked out.
Yeah, like I think that happens a lot in parenting, but sometimes it doesn't come out quite explicitly. Like you'll see people who have 2 very opposite views and they'll go like the passive aggressive nature where like, oh, whatever you decide. And then it'll come up like 2 or 3 days later being like, oh yeah, well you
all
did
your
this
fault
and
because-
it's all your fault because
Right.
and that is so unhealthy in a relationship. And so them going like head to head on it, it is the much better course of affairs than like keeping things in and not saying something and then have it explode out later. I think that's something like I've learned through dealing with conflict through the years because I used to be very conflict adverse. Like even just the thought of approaching somebody with a problem used to like make my heart want to pound out of my chest and give me such a headache that I couldn't think straight. And through doing it, I've gotten a bit better so much better that I was okay confronting Kyle on the podcast about something.
You were trying to lead him into a story, and it was so funny.
Into
I
an
wonder.
ad break.
Yes.
And he talked over me. He's like, hold on a second. I have one more thing to say. And I'm like, and I let him talk. And you'll hear it in the episode. You'll hear it. But what you might not hear, even though we should put it in, I don't know. What you won't hear is when I went to the ad break, I'm like, Kyle, you got to trust me here. And I'm like, I'm making it kind of like comedic, and he's laughing as well. But that's something like I would have kept bottled in for so long and then have it be like spout out negative instead of just dealing with it in the moment, getting each person on the same page about what needs to happen and then moving on from there.
No, I totally love the message that they're sharing about how like conflict is healthy, and what a big like mic drop moment for me, or eye opener, whatever you want to, whatever your preferences there, was when he talked about how even though you may not be on the exact same parenting page, or maybe one of you is further along in the parenting process that you guys want to have going forward, knowing that your partner is knowing that you're doing your best, that you really are trying to do your best, and that you're not coming at it from a nefarious perspective, I think is immensely helpful. Because I think a lot of times it is real easy for us to think that if you are the more gentle parent in the household and you've got the other parent who's doing a lot of the my way or the highway and the yelling and or the harsher parenting, I think it's easy to feel like that parent doesn't even care, and that's why they're acting that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that right? And I do feel like they made a really good point. If you look at that person and be like, listen, I know you're trying your best right now and you're using the tools that you have. I'd love for us to like try some more with this, like
With
instead of
this
saying
other
like, you
direction.
don't even care, you're scaring the crap out of the kids. You don't get far that way.
No.
Yeah.
No, and it's a hard place to be, because also, I mean, one of the reasons like I never used to share my feelings with people like about things that they did that may have hurt me is because I would be afraid that they would come back at me with everything that I did to hurt them. And so it wouldn't be like a discussion about them anymore. It would be a discussion of how I deserved it and brought it on myself. And I don't know why I ever thought that was never happened to me before, except maybe as a kid with like in parenting things, because that was just how you parented in the 80s. You're like, well, you did this and you did that.
I think
That's why I acted
normal
that way.
insecurity. I think that a lot of people have that fear. Like that is what you just described is me to a T. Like I am so scared of conflict because I'm afraid of what's going to be thrown back in my face. Because I know that I am not perfect. I know I have got plenty of flaws. And so, yeah, I 100% can understand where you're coming from on that one. And I think a lot of people probably have that.
Yeah. And I think like the thing I've learned is that I'm pretty aware of the flaws I have because they have been told to me by many people.
Well,
like,
and
I
you're
don't even call
also
them as flaws.
introspective.
And I'm introspective.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly improving, and I know how things like relate, all of those things. So now I come with a confidence. I'm like, well, if they say that about me, I'll be like, yeah, of course I am. I'm working on that. I get that. Let's go back to this situation right here, though, because that's what we're talking about. And also learning that's unfair in conversations for people to do that.
Well,
and for them not to listen, and that I have the right to be listened to as well.
Essentially, they're trying to redirect the conversation to something that is less threatening. So that's and as a parent, we're pretty used to that. Our kids do that a lot, especially if you got a teen. They love to redirect the conversation out of what is being brought up. So
because it's not their fault, it is always yours. If you have a problem, you have to let them think about it, and then they'll come back.
And we're saying that very tongue in cheek, but
it's teenager. It's the brain. It's how it is. They're not bad people. It is just how their brain is working at this moment. That's facts. That's the facts.
Yep. So, hey, if you loved this podcast episode, do us a favor. Just trot on over to the rate and review section of the podcast platform you're listening to, especially if you're on Apple. We love to hear feedback on our episodes, what you guys thought. what you guys think of Sara and Kyle, who here are listening to us as fans of the Art of Raising Humans podcast. I'm curious, like on that this is your first episode. What you think of us here at No Guilt Mom? And then if you really enjoy it, you can come join us in our podcast group. We have a free podcast group and Facebook. So we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, and until next time, remember, the best mom's a happy mom. Take care of you. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for stopping by.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.